Welcome.
Welcome. We're excited that you're here today for our Canvas PD series that we've been leading this year that goes with our Canvas agreements. My name is Carrie Coonert and I'm joined by Chris Giles and Nicole Carter. And we're all part of the digital curriculum team. And today we have a special guest, Jeff Crapper, and he's going to be talking to us all about how to use modules for self-directed learning. So it's a big topic and we're just going to scratch the surface of it, and wanted to make sure that you had access to the slides. So that was on the first screen there. It's a bit.ly. And so make sure that you have access to these slides because we have put a number of resources in there as well if you are watching from home. So we are excited to get started. And this is actually our very first episode of level 3. So we have done level 1, like an introductory, level 2, like advancing, and now we're all the way up to level 3 at this point in the year. So we're excited for some more advanced Canvas user topics to be covered. So the way this is going to work is we're going to share, and Jeff is going to talk. And then at the end of his session, we will open it up for questions specifically about using modules for self-directed learning first. And after we've exhausted all of those questions, we will turn the recording off, and then we're happy to open it up to just any Canvas related questions for those of you here in the live session. So we're happy you're here with us today, and we're ready to get started.
And yeah, it's the first episode of level 3, which is super exciting. And I think this is when we start to get into some really interesting stuff, and stuff that I am like personally, this might be why I was kind of wanting to lead off with this, is just simply because this, I think, is the next iteration of like digital learning. And so very excited that we have Jeff on here to kind of talk about it a little bit. I think especially at the secondary level, I have always said that secondary teachers can learn so much from what our elementary teachers do, because they're so used to, at the elementary level, doing small group intervention and table groups and having kids work in different areas at different tasks at different times. And so often that secondary mindset of direct instruction, lecture-based, I don't know how, oftentimes, like for me, I wasn't necessarily given any kind of training or instruction on how to do small group intervention, or even how to kind of like assess like where my readers might be and how I might move them as an English teacher into the next area. Like that's a lot of learning, a lot of things for us to kind of take into our lesson design concepts. And oftentimes when we're looking at a classroom of 40 plus students, we kind of have that mindset, well, lecture-based, instruction is easier because I have so many kids, I have so many things that I have to do. I don't know how I would even set up my classroom to provide an area where I could do small group interactions or interventions. And so that's where we kind of come into this realm where we're thinking, how could I just need to clone myself, right? Like I need to figure out a way that there's more of me in the classroom to make this all happen. And I think that's where setting up self-directed learning, setting up modules, getting those prerequisites in can become super, super helpful, especially if you're thinking in terms of kind of like the flipped classroom module or idea or model where you're adding in some videos of instruction where the kids can go off and get the direct instruction while you're over with another group working on things. So this just, if you set it up correctly, offers you a way to really dive deeper, especially at the secondary level, with those kinds of personalized learning and self-directed piece where kids are going at their own pace, making their own choices, and you're essentially cloning yourself. So I'm really excited for people to dive into this concept and for Jeff to share a little bit more about what he's doing in the classroom, because as Chris said in the chat, this definitely is like teaching 2.0. This is moving us into a new realm.
Yeah, and definitely to echo again, Nicole, like this is not a, hey, I'll just wake up one day and do, no, this is like a more advanced process, advanced thought process and how you're doing things. And I have called this teaching 2.0 for a long, long time. So anyways.
Well, I want to touch on that, what you said, like, this is something where it's definitely like, you need to know where your kids are going. You need to have a concept ready to go for, this is the unit. this is where they're going to end up. This is their summative. I'm going to backwards plan. Without those tools and concepts, this is not something that you can necessarily build, I don't think, day by day on the fly. Like this takes some setting up. So I think it's wise that it's in the level 3, Canvas level 3 of the user agreements, because this is something that, you know, maybe you've worked for the last couple of years to build your units up and to really synthesize that information and get a good idea of what you've got going. And now you're ready to move into that next realm.
Yep. What I'm showing right now is this course is called Growing with Canvas. And so with Growing with Canvas, what's powerful about this is that this is a class that is in TeacherSource, and I'll put the link in. Any teacher can register and sign up. And the reason why I'm showing this course is because it is built by modules, where there's 2 parts of this, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time into this. However, when you go into the modules as a student, and you're going to participate, and you want to participate in this course as a student, and I'll just go ahead and go as a student real fast. There we go. You'll notice that it comes up with a few things, like this is my introduction. There are no rules. I can literally just click on introduction and go, you know, and click the next tool. That's not a big deal. That's pretty easy to do. But when I get to the next module, it looks like I have something that says complete all items. And that's something that the teacher, me, put in place for those students to engage in. In other words, when the students are going through the process, they actually have to go ahead and click on the first one, read the information, and then they can click next. And I want you to notice that in the module, it's actually grayed out. There's actually sections of the module that are grayed out, and that's done intentional. So you can create your modules so that students can progress whatever way they want, or they have to progress sequentially, which I'll show you in just a second, or they have to complete things and potentially even score a certain score value in order for them to move on. And that's some of the rules that Jeff was alluding to that he does, I think, in his other class. And again, I can't come down here. You'll notice that nurturing 2, even though I can visually see it, it's got a lock on it. And I can't do anything as a learner until I've completed the module above. And I'll go ahead and leave student view. And just briefly, when I click on the little 3 dots next to the module, you can click on edit. This is the magic. After you create your module, the magic takes place when you click on the jelly beans, you click edit. And this is where you can say things like, I want this module locked until a certain date, which is beautiful. I can have a date on it when it's released, or I can choose to come down here to where I actually have set it up on purpose, where the students have to progress sequentially and they must complete all these items. And I've added the items that they have to complete. And right now it just says view, but you could change it to mark as done. And the reason why is that gives the students an extra, wait a second, I just read it, and I have to physically click marked as done. So I'm being asked as a student to physically be part of this process. Not only am I watching a video or I'm reading a book or reading an article, but I'm not doing it mindlessly. I'm doing it and then I have to click intentional, like mark as done. Or if there's such a place where you can actually contribute to a page, and in this case, let me double check right here, customize, this is the assignment. In this space, you could actually have the students say, no, you can't go past this until you've actually submitted it in an assignment, or potentially you scored at least some value out of that. And so this is where when we begin to go ahead and use modules, like Jeff said, it's not possible for him to teach 4 subject areas, but he can clone himself by using the modules. And it's possible that you can say, all of you have to do the first module, you have no choice. After that, you're released into the other modules. But once you choose whatever module you want to learn, like for Jeff's certification process, they still have some rules. You got to mark as done. You got to show a quiz. In order to get out of this next module, you need to go ahead and maybe complete something. So that's where the kind of like the magic takes place, edit, and then the jelly beans, and then edit. And then also a prerequisite could be simply, you can't go anywhere until you've done the orientation, or you've done what Jeff has got, his very first one. Like, you have to finish this module first before you can even choose something else. And that's where you could go ahead and select those other modules. So I'm going to just briefly stop sharing, and then is there anybody who has any questions, or they have any comments, or they've even experienced this themselves, either as a learner or as a teacher, and do you want to go ahead and make any comments or questions about that?
And Chris, I wanted to add,
yeah, totally.
Because some of my content is in a copyrighted LMS, but I do that exactly with their tests. they can't take their tests until they score 75% or higher on 3 different quizzes. And if they can't immediately retake the quiz, it automatically says you have to wait an hour before you take it.
I love it.
And so it's nice because that forces them to do at least one homework assignment in that section. And so that's a way to kind of screen it, because you're right. You're going to get some people on Canvas, if you do the test, they're just going to hit C, 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 C just to move on. And so having that safety net is huge.
Yeah, it's like an automatic check for understanding, or an automatic like formative, if you want to call it that. And like Jeff says, his big thing is the content. A lot of his content is outside of Canvas, so he's got to find a way to leverage that content outside with what Canvas can do. And so that's one of the things I love what Jeff's approach is, because not every teacher has that challenge of having content that is living outside in his own platform. So. All right, questions, comments, or process thoughts that you want to share, or anybody want to share?
I just want to say, I think this could work great during like our differentiation time, where you're trying, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can get kids working in groups. This is just one of them, but I like the idea of having them self-directed in a way, sequential like this, and the tracking of it. I think it's going to work really nice in certain areas for sure. Of course, 5th grade, elementary kids are not quite as independent, but it'd be good training for them.
Well, and one of the challenges is, if you're teaching 5th grade, is, we typically set up a module by week, because we want students to progress through the week. And that's totally fine. But it's also, like you mentioned, that independent time, like, hey, I'm going to have you learn on a couple of different topics like Jeff has, where you could go off on your own. You don't need to progress on the weekly module. It's another module that sets you up on purpose.
Well, and we have such a huge range. I mean, just in my class this year, I have some kids who are reading literally at kindergarten level, and all the way up to sophomore in high school, the silver level, and everything in between. So I always, it's nice to have times for those high flyers to just kind of, run, So.
Yeah, I've had a teacher who taught at Solar a few years ago. She intentionally set up more scaffold modules for the students who are struggling on, X Factor or whatever it was, and then a couple challenge modules. But the students never really knew. Like, she didn't like say to, hey, Scott, you're doing this one, and now everybody knows. No, it was not that at all. It was just, a message, or, hey, I noticed that your quiz score or whatever it was, need help, or you're way above. So, hey, can you go ahead and spend a few minutes in this module? And so that gave them that independence without embarrassing them. And the students, across the classroom didn't really know that. So.
And I was going to say, before Amy left, she was talking a little bit about using some of these same features for like Genius Hour, for example. And I think that that's brilliant. That's one thing that I definitely did back in the day when I was in the classroom. I think anytime you can identify where benchmarks are for kids to turn things in, and maybe even set up, a page that they have to view that says check in with your teacher now. They might be flying through course information, but if you set those little pieces of check-in times with you, so that, it's less, again, you're facilitating, you're maybe back in the real world, we're walking around seeing what kids are doing, but then they hit that marker that says check in with teacher. And that can be incredibly powerful and helpful to just have that stopping point so where they are through that process. Is there any way for us to show how we see students progress through the modules too? Like, what does that look like from my perspective as a teacher to see student progress in a prerequisite or requirement module?
One moment.
Yeah, as Carrie's saying, like true differentiation. And I think it's so important when before I left my job in the classroom, this is everything that Jeff was kind of talking about here was where I was headed with my 8th grade English class. I was setting up all of the modules ahead of time. I was going to throw my hands up and let the chips fall where they lie. I was going to have my kids pick and choose. What essay do you want to work on? You want to do argumentative? Awesome. I might have 5 kids doing an argumentative essay, and then 5 kids that are super jazzed about doing personal narrative. And that's hard, I think, for some teachers to get into the realm of saying, I'm totally okay with having 5 kids doing this and 10 kids doing this and another 5 doing this, because you've done that work ahead of time, and kind of just let them go and meet them where they're at that point.
And I think, Amy, the question or a comment, right?
I just was going to say, it seems like there's a couple of different skill sets to make this happen. I think you have to have the Canvas knowledge to know how to set it up, but then also the wisdom of the material, of how you want them to move, when would be good check-in points, what would be a progression, what are things
100%.
to skip over. And this is my first year in 5th grade, moved from 2nd grade. I would be totally on board in joining someone and creating something to use this year. If anybody's interested.
Yeah, and I think
I'm with you, Scott. I've got a huge range.
And I think going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, the fact that this is in terms of our Canvas user agreements and this being a level 3, it's with the intention that you have been in a Canvas environment for a couple of years, meaning you've already built content and thought about it, and have that knowledge of both your unit and Canvas to move into this. So I guess I'm just saying, don't feel like this is like don't feel down on yourself, like that you're not there yet or whatever, because I definitely think this is something that you move into.
Well, and one thing I wanted to add too that hopefully would help Amy and Scott is that you can actually in Canvas assign homework assignments to specific students. And so that would be helpful too. So if you had students that are at certain reading levels, you could actually assign it to just a few kids, and the rest of the kids wouldn't know any different, because you could have 5 groups working on 5 different assignments. And that's the way you can do differentiation within the module.
Yeah, I mean, I could see this working really well in science, social studies, even in writing when we do the argumentative. Like I have a few kids that are really into animal rights. One of my kids wanted to, or one of our persuasive papers on puppy farms, or puppy mills. I had no idea what that was. And so we have a few kids that are really gravitating towards that. So it'd be a great way to get kids on their topic of interest for a while. And I think this will be great.
I also think of modules too, like I think about in elementary and middle school, high school, we could say, but also it's like when we did centers, right? We had our students move around the classroom in centers, and we had set up at that center, this is your task, this is your workflow. And so modules could be leveraged the same way. Like I've created centers for my students to progress through. And so and again, and that is the benefit. I think or Nicole had asked, like, what does a teacher see as far as how much students have progressed? Well, I'm not going to see how much my students have progressed through the module. It's not possible. But if I had different points of check-ins, like a short quiz or a response to a discussion, something that would allow them to physically turn something in to alert me, then I could definitely see the progression of where my students are.
I am familiar with Chris and Jeffrey's, how you build your prereqs in each course. I do work with middle school as well, and I'm very familiar with both ways of doing it. Where in the process, could you share where in the process, when you have 5 small groups working at the same time and different topic, different theme, where does the direct instruction and scaffolding and front loading fits?
Yeah, so for my class, I do the direct instruction. So I might give them the framework. And so like Nicole mentioned, like Genius Hour. So that's kind of like, think about that, but in a larger scale. And so that's how I teach my classes. But again, I work at a STEM school, right? So at an option school. So, but basically, I usually give them the framework of what the activity is or the lesson is. And then that basically they know the constraints, and then they just go from there. So like for my seniors, I don't even give them the problem they're investigating. They have to come up with their own problem that they choose to investigate. Then they have to figure out how they're going to investigate it and do that. And so they might meet with me and basically work on opportunities to figure out how they're going to do that or what equipment they might need. But the other thing I've tried to do too, and it is kind of scary, like when Nicole said, being a middle school teacher for many years, trying to give up control, it's something that is overwhelming. But one of the things that I do is I use huddles. And so we used to have an instructional coach that taught me how to use huddles well. And so instead of doing that all class announcement and breaking my students' momentum, since every student has a facilitator for a specific project, I'll say, hey, I need all your facilitators in the back of the classroom. And so that way the rest of the group can still work on their project and I'm not interrupting the flow, but then I have that message that I'm working with them. And then they're able to relay that back to their table groups. And I also do that too with being a former science teacher in biology. Instead of doing the all class announcement and basically interrupting the flow or momentum, because let's be honest, whether it's grade school, middle school, or high school, inertia can go both ways, right? You want to keep that object in motion, still in motion. And so I'll say, hey, I need all of the task managers to come in the back and grab your equipment, and the rest of them are working. So I usually have a slide up in my room. When I used to be a studio teacher for the multilingual department, so I'd have people come and visit my classroom. And so you would look at 5 or 10 minutes of just knowing the constraints of what we're doing. And this is when I was teaching biology. And then they would go to Canvas, and then basically I would check in with groups and rotate. I knew it was a good day when I'd get about 10 to 15,000 steps in my classroom, because the students would be working and I'm just, again, going from group to group, just making sure that they need help. But you have to have a system in place, right? And so creating that system that works for you, it does take some time, and it may look chaotic. And I know when I do this with my middle school students in the summer, it's way more chaotic, but it's really cool that with the middle school program, they actually have to build a boat out of cardboard that floats meat. And they learn about buoyancy, and we do all of our ELD instruction regarding the theme. So like water and rivers. Math is focused on surface area, and then of course science and engineering and buoyancy. But it's the only day at work where I have to bring 3 changes of clothes, because in between I get soaked, and some kids I think intentionally make their boats have holes in them. So I sink, but it's been a really cool experience because it gives them that project, it gives them the hands-on learning. And at the same part, we are able to collaborate with the other subjects, so it all kind of matches up. But yeah, we've done some really cool summer school projects with the multilingual department. And again, it's that hands-on group-based learning, like I mentioned.
Well, and I think I was asked by another TOSA this morning if people are starting to have conversations about what happens when we go back to limited person or hybrid or back to face-to-face. And, if anyone is talking about flipped classroom model, and especially knowing that we've been through this process so far where we've been recording a lot of our live Zoom sessions, and that teachers have kind of gotten into the habit of that direct instruction actually being recorded, whether or not those recordings from this year can work as we transfer into next year, or if we toss them. But that concept or idea of providing some direct instruction via video, whether it's your video or another video, to kind of go back to Jose's question, there has to be some transfer of material and content at some point, whether they're reading an article or watching a video or watching you in a video. And oftentimes what I would do is set those up within the module itself, always with instructions in mind, like while you watch this video, you are doing da 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 da. And if you've at all seen our previous episode where we talk about Canvas Studio, that would be a great way to sub in, your content with formative questions along the way to make sure that the kids are getting the information. Research shows that's a great way for students to retain content. So that would be a couple of thoughts that I have just on how you set up that direct instruction to self-pace them through. Because there has to be some instruction. It's not like they're just all out in the internet searching for things, right?
No, totally agree with you. Yeah. And I think I just put in the box that the powerful feature about Canvas Studio is you can know who watched the video, how long they watched the video, and you can even embed questions that relate to that video. And it could be YouTube. It doesn't always have to be you recording it, that they have to respond to. And so, again, I think of these are checks for me to understand, are you going through the flow as a learner? And so if I were to start this today, I could only start with a small, tiny module that my students could progress through on their own. And I would just, like Jeff said, we're moving from teacher to facilitator, which I think is one of the goals for teachers. I'm tired of direct instruction. I'm tired of talking to my kids for hours at a time. Now I want to facilitate.
I think there's something to be said about like Scott's example with the student and puppy mills. And, the basic idea here is that like kids love choice. They love being able to decide on a topic or a problem to research or dive deeper that's meaningful to them. At the core of the puppy mill essay or whatever is potentially argumentative writing. So there are core pieces that you can help with the direct instruction on the setup and design and delivery of that argumentative essay, regardless of what topic they choose that's interesting to them. And so that's maybe where that direct instruction comes from. Pick your topic, pick your choice, but then I need to see that you've done a thesis statement. I need to see that you've argued back. I need to see that you're using, the persuasive language within the essay or whatever, right? Like there are pieces within the standards or targets themselves that we can touch on with the direct instruction, while still allowing the students to kind of devolve into whatever, problem or issue that is important to them.
I think
Jose, hopefully this is helpful too. Can I share my screen just briefly? So the other thing I do for my direct instruction, as you can see, is that I have I have a YouTube channel already set up that has everything organized by learning target. But one of the things I can tell you with working at a school like Base that has a very high population of again, multilingual students. The really cool part is that, and maybe this would be something, Scott, to help with your, your fifth graders, is that in YouTube, you can actually, there's two things that I've seen, and so you have this stuff here, but I have so many of my students will use closed captioning so they can read at the same point. But then the other thing too is that you can also change it to a variety of different languages. So a lot of my students who speak primarily Spanish will actually listen to it in English, but they'll read it in Spanish. And so that's one of the ways that I do my direct instruction.
We are trying to kind of build here, right? Like, year one with Canvas, like we want you to start kind of playing around with the tools that are like assignments and quizzes and discussions, then putting those into, intentional modules. And then once you have those intentional modules, let's come back in and build these prerequisites and requirements. And then once you have that ready to go, now we can talk a little bit more about mastery learning, which is one component to me is that kind of forward and back instruction. You need to, come back, but then it's also taking a look at like standards-based grading and knowing that kids have hit certain targets, how many times and how well they're doing, and giving us that data and feedback on targets, which is also kind of huge.